So today, we're going to be doing something different. We're not going to be ranting, but this has been on my mind for quite a while now, so I think it's about time I get it off my chest. I've seen a lot of videos recently complaining about Phase 4 and how it has no direction, and it sucks because it's not Endgame. And I disagree. I think Comic-Con proved that. They definitely have a plan, it just took them a minute to get started. So this is not another one of those, oh, Phase 4 sucks sort of videos. This problem is most likely going to show up in Phase 5 and maybe even Phase 6. This video is about one chunk of Marvel. The shows. I do not like MCU shows anymore, or at least not to the level I used to. I don't know if the hype finally wore off or the fatigue is starting to set in, but these shows just aren't that good. So this is the problem with Marvel shows.
Hey John! How'd you find us this time?
Strap in, because we got a lot to cover. Let's begin with saturation, or the oversaturation. Back in the good old days of Marvel, we get maybe 1 or 2 films a year. 3 if we were lucky, sometimes they would skip a year. That would be enough to keep us satisfied. It became sort of a thing to go see these movies every 6 months or so. There was no shows or spin-offs or anything like that. It was simple and it was easy to follow, and then Phase 4 happened. That's where they really began to ramp stuff up. Now we're guaranteed 3 movies a year alongside as many shows as they want. And in just Phase 4 alone, the phase that started last year is already longer than all other phases combined. Add up phases 1, 2, and 3, that's a little under 50 hours of watch time. And Phase 4 alone just broke that. Yeah, that's a lot of Marvel. They're choosing quantity over quality. You can look at it how you want, but it's kind of showing that some of these shows are taking a hit. Back in Phase 1, they were just movies. There was no team-up thing that was expected. You got an Iron Man movie, then a Hulk movie, then an Iron Man movie, then a Thor movie, and then a Captain America movie, and then a team up. It was all pretty small scale, and it sort of stuck together. Phase 2 got a bit more adventurous with Guardians and Ant-Man, but they eventually got tied in, and same with Phase 3. That's where it all really climaxed, with the end of Phase 3. Infinity War and Endgame was the culmination of over 11 years of film. It was the peak for Marvel, and now Marvel has almost the impossible task of trying to top that. Where do you go? What do you do after going to space to fight the man behind the slaughter? Well, other universes, of course. And to do this means setting up so many different storylines that you start to forget others. And it feels like they're rushing it all. We don't need all these stories at once. A majority of these shows follow the 6-episode format, which at first glance might seem like a good thing, but then you realize it really doesn't work. Let me give you the inside scoop into how these shows are actually written. Okay, so we want Falcon to get the shield, for Bucky to get some therapy, and to introduce a fake Captain America. We might do something with him in like 5 years, but we want to introduce him now. That right there is enough for a solid movie. But what they do is stretch it out, throw in some random subplot, and turn it into a mediocre show. You think I'm kidding? You think I'm kidding? Look at Hawkeye. Another passing the torch sort of thing, dealing with Clint's trauma, giving someone else the title of Hawkeye, and then for no reason we get another random subplot. And you know what makes it worse? So this girl is one of the villains of Hawkeye. Her name is Echo. That doesn't really matter. I never made a video on Hawkeye, honestly, because I just didn't care enough. But this character, she was fine. I didn't do much. It didn't really spark all that much in me. But now she's getting her own show. Why? Why though? I don't get it. What is so interesting about her character that she gets her own show? I mean, they'll give anyone a show now. I mean, Groot is getting his own little special. Sue me, but I really don't get it. The only reason they are stretching out these shows is for money, so people stay subscribed to Disney Plus for longer. And that's it. It doesn't get simpler than that. And the one series that was able to avoid this was WandaVision. They got 9 episodes. They were able to use the time to fully flesh out Wanda and her past, and to build a really solid show. You can't tell a meaningful story in 6 episodes. You just can't do it. You can't expect us to latch onto these characters in 6 episodes, because that's just not enough time. Either make these shows longer, or what I think would be the better option would be to cut out the fat and turn them into movies, because these shows have a lot of filler. Maybe 6 episodes would work if they were used properly. Maybe we'd have enough time to fully explore these characters, but we don't have that time. So either make these shows longer, or cut off the fat and turn them into movies. They don't even have to be theater releases. You can drop them on Disney Plus as exclusives. Even Falcon and the Winter Soldier was a show that only really looks at the 2 leads a little bit. Compared to WandaVision, it wasn't that deep, and we see Bucky deal with his trauma for maybe 5 minutes of one episode. Even though these were existing characters, they never really got their time to shine, and I thought this show would be that, and it kind of missed the mark. The villains for all of these shows are just bad, like unequivocally terrible. I will clarify, not all of them, but most of them, a majority. As it stands, we have 6 shows, and one of them was kind of good, and the rest range from mediocre to outright horrendous. Moon Knight had the only sort of good villain. They weren't the best, but they filled the story well enough, had a relationship with the protagonist. With the way Marvel is going right now, I wouldn't be surprised if he got his own show like next year. Next, I'll give it to Loki. Honestly, Kang wasn't that bad. I enjoyed this one, but there are worse ones yet to come. Falcon and the Winter Soldier takes the 3rd spot. The villain, well, which one? The terrorists were pretty useless, so I'm just gonna stick with evil Captain America. I thought this concept of a character was pretty interesting and also super underutilized. This is a pretty interesting character, and I think he should get Echo's show because, I mean, come on, Echo versus... what is his name? Like evil Captain America. I mean, is there a debate? Next, I gotta give it to WandaVision. This one, we just didn't need Agatha. I mean, she was pretty useless. She didn't really do much. Agatha simply complicated the plot more than it had to be. Wanda is her own villain. We don't need Agatha. A bit lower down on the list is the evil aunt from Miss Marvel. It just wasn't that good. I didn't make a video on this show either, but the villain was pretty bad. Not only was the motive pretty weak, but the overall presence just wasn't there. And the worst offender is Hawkeye. Not only is the entire villain subplot horrendously mismanaged, but by the end, they bring in Kingpin. Kingpin, you know, the guy from Daredevil? And then they nerfed him and killed him off. Yeah, Kingpin was a one-off. I think wasted potential is a bit of an understatement. I don't really understand how that was allowed to happen. It feels like these shows are only meant to set up something else. Like there was a fine line between introducing new characters and stories separate from the existing MCU, and then maybe tying them in later down the line, and then there's creating new characters to only tie them into the greater picture. And that's where real stories kind of get cucked. The stories they're telling in these shows don't actually matter anymore. They're writing these stories backwards, from finish to start. They have the outcome they want, for example, Kate Bishop to be Hawkeye or Sam to be Captain America, and then they write backwards. And then they throw in some filler to try and get a full show out of it. Let's take a look at Miss Marvel for a sec. I don't think the show was bad, but this show was just a setup for a movie. This only exists so the Marvel's movie can exist. And that's kind of demeaning to the rest of the story, because you can't tell a meaningful story to only drop it for some flashy crossover. I'd be fine if we just got a Miss Marvel show exploring her character and not tying it into anything else. I would have preferred that. Marvel is at a point where there's an expectation for there to be a crossover or to tie stuff in, where they don't really have to do that. If they cut down on the amount of shows and they did not tie in anything and simply tried to tell engaging stories that mattered, then I wouldn't really have that many problems with these shows. All the 6 episodes have the same issues. The first 2 are good, and then they crash and burn by the 3rd and 4th. And then they sort of bring it back in the last 2 episodes, but that's what makes these shows feel just so These shows are only 6 episodes. That's pretty short. And having useless episodes is just something you can't keep doing. They are wasting episodes on meaningless subplots where they could be focusing on the actual story at play. And that leaves you with rushed stories. And having all these shows tie into the greater MCU is making it harder for new people to get into Marvel. The movies, that's cool. There may be a lot, but it wasn't that hard to follow. It was pretty straightforward. You watch one, you watch the next one, that's it. And it was all sort of connected. But now, to watch and understand the movies, you have to watch the show. And it's starting to feel like a chore, so you don't miss out on what's happening. And to make it worse, some of these shows don't even matter. Like, we still have not seen Sam or Bucky since their show. It's been over a year. No mention, no cameo, no nothing. And White Vision, for example, from WandaVision, he's still out there somewhere. We've gotten literally zero, zilch, nothing about him, on his whereabouts or what he's up to, nothing. Like, we have certain shows that are propelling the movies forward, like WandaVision or Loki, but then these other shows are just separate stories. Like Moon Knight, it doesn't connect to anything, but it was an intriguing show, but people just aren't watching them because they don't think it matters, and to an extent, they'd be right. Like, people are just now watching WandaVision because they don't understand what happened in Multiverse of Madness. And this is why Phase 4 feels so disjointed. They are setting up so many different storylines at the same time, connecting some, not connecting others, with no real continuation to any. And anytime they release a new show or movie, it feels completely different from the last one. Like, for example, we're going from Egyptian gods to a Disney Channel show. There's no real flow to any of it. And hopefully this will change as it goes on, but right now it's looking bleak. Okay, so I wrote this video before San Diego Comic-Con. The future of Marvel is no longer bleak. Our Lord and Savior Kevin Feige pulled through, and Phases 5 and 6 are looking extremely promising. But my point still stands. Something that I haven't really touched on yet is that the sheer quantity of shows is putting a lot of strain on the VFX team. And because they have so many different projects to finish, they can't do the work to the best of their ability. They just don't have the time to do it. And the result is CGI that doesn't really look the best. The VFX artists are refusing to work because of these insane deadlines. They just don't work because they can't do it. They don't have the time. Marvel is just doing too much. Phase 4 will always be remembered as the setup phase because everything under the sun is getting their own project or show. Like, some of these just don't matter, and they don't have to do all this. Sure, they have to restart Marvel, but they're doing too much. They have the top Endgame, but they aren't doing it the right way. They have the multiverse, they have the Fantastic Four, they have X-Men. I don't know why they're wasting their time with stuff like Echo or She-Hulk. Stop developing new stories and continue with existing ones. You can't just introduce new characters and then drop them entirely. Having us wait years to see these characters again is just not good. By the time we'll see Falcon again, I will have forgotten everything about him and his character. Like with phases 1, 2, and 3, they'll introduce a character and then do something with them, and then sure, they won't be in every movie, but we'll come back to them every so often. Keep it simple, have the main shows run for maybe a season or two, like Loki, introduce characters through their solo films, and stick with what you have, and then grow that. And then slowly over time introduce new characters, because introducing 5 or 6 new characters in a year at the same time is just not working. And with everything I've said, Marvel fatigue is really setting in strong, so I think that's enough Marvel videos for now, because I've hit my limit. I'm gonna need a little break before I can come back to Marvel. I say this now, but I'll probably watch She-Hulk and I'll probably make a video on it, but if you don't expect any Marvel videos for a while, then you know why.